The Steam Summer Sale is here, running from June 29th until July 13th, and I've got a deal for you. In this video, I'm going to give you 12 recommendations in 12 minutes or less for strategy games, simulation city builders. We've got it all. So let's jump in with our YouTube housekeeping out of the way and dive straight into the deals, starting with Crusader Kings 3, which is, granted, not a new game, and certainly not the only Paradox grand strategy game worth a mention, but here we have a great discount, 50% off. Now, Crusader Kings 3, being a bit newer, doesn't often see discounts at this magnitude. If you're wondering what on earth it is, well, it's probably one of the best grand strategy games out there, certainly for its period. But more than that, it's about characters. It's about telling a story, maybe raising a family, maybe plotting the death of a foreign ruler to take their lands, or engaging in all-out warfare. Crusader Kings 3 delivers what grand strategy should deliver in the scale of its map, the size of its empires, and the really critical details around cultures, religions, you name it. But it's actually this element that I prefer the most about Crusader Kings 3. The storytelling, the building a legacy, getting up to some honestly damn nasty deeds, nefarious deeds. Maybe you choose to eat your foe instead of simply destroying them. It's up to you in Crusader Kings 3 at 50% off. The next item on my list is Humankind. And much like Crusader Kings 3, Humankind deserves a mention here for reaching its best discount we've ever seen. First equal, with maybe only a couple of other opportunities. An 80% off discount for Humankind is a great deal. What is Humankind? Well, it was initially labeled as the Civ 6 killer when it released in August of 2021 to rather mixed reviews. The game has since received a lot of updates onto its core 4X historical strategy game formula, similar to Civilization 6, but different in some key ways. For example, Humankind is more about the journey, generating fame points in each of its cultural eras. And of course, in each era, you'll actually change to an entirely different culture, with a new unit, a new emblematic district, for example, and many other things to explore, including traits that last the entire game, one for each culture you pick up. What Humankind also delivers differently is another example that you can see on your screen. Its combat system, from deploying your units to then engaging in these kind of game within a game, turn-based, round-based fights. Humankind did receive a mixed reception. I think most of the updates that it's received since have been pretty good. The game is looking in a better shape, although I note that the Steam user reviews don't reflect that opinion. But either way, at 80% off, Humankind, I think, is a great deal. Moving on to the next item on my list, it's Dune Spice Wars at what might seem like a relatively low discount at 20% off. But I think it's important to remember that this blend of real-time strategy and 4X gaming is still in its early access phase. It came out around the middle, just before the middle of last year, and every few months it delivers stellar update after stellar update. What you're seeing on your screen at the moment is from the very latest update, which actually came out only about a week ago, the Conquest update, adding a massive new game mode that stretches potentially 10 or 12 hours as you attempt to take over different territories of the map, each one representing a unique challenge and kind of a game of its own. Dune Spice Wars also, of course, delivers on the Doom franchise, the Doom fandom, and with Dune 2 coming up, I believe, later this year, releasing in cinemas. Don't quote me on that. This is a Steam deals video, not a cinema video. Now might be a great time to pick up this really fantastic early access game. Next up on my list, speaking of fantastic early access experiences, the overwhelmingly positively reviewed Against the Storm is 35% off in the Steam Summer Sale. Against the Storm deserves its huge reviews because Against the Storm delivers something a little bit different for about $18 US in this Steam sale anyway. You get access to a city builder that is also a roguelike game. It's also a base building game, and it combines it all into a really fantastic formula. You start off in a town racing against the storm, a fight to gather resources and sort of pay your taxes, if you will. Every unlock that you get, or at least most of them, are somewhat randomized, but there's also an upgrade and progression tree to keep you focused on the long term. The levels themselves require you to build a town, or city, if you will, a settlement, a base, whatever you want to call it. And once you complete that one, you expand out across the map, trying to win over the queen and ultimately, of course, gain supremacy across the world. Whether one or another city fails or succeeds doesn't necessarily destroy your game, and the replayability here is endless. A great pickup. The next item on my list is obviously also a great pickup, at least in my opinion. This is Anno 1800, 75% off. Makes it a pretty cheap buy, but still, of course, worth noting that this one still retails at a pretty high normal retail price considering its age. However, its age shouldn't be a fault of Anno. What is it, you might be asking? It's a city builder at its core. It's also an economic simulator, and it does a very good job at doing that through trade, through gathering of resources, and of course building these beautiful cities that aren't just about gathering resources and potentially, of course, ultimately entering warfare, but also about, providing a civil peace, providing what people need to make them happy and to allow your city to flourish. For its time period, it may very well be the best city builder on offer, and of course the entire franchise is also on special, so you might want to check out the rest if one of them is more appealing to you. The next one on my list, perhaps the least expected because it's a relatively indie title, is Songs of Conquest. Songs of Conquest, like some of the earlier entries in the list at 50% off, is presenting itself very favorably, and by that I mean we don't often see a deal this great on a game like this. Songs of Conquest really sort of purports itself as a turn-based strategy game inspired by the 90s classics, and you will have seen that, of course, play out with the graphics on screen. You can't miss it. What it does, though, I would say it does actually more than that. It's not just inspired by them, it helps to bring them into a more modern age. One example are the animations during combat, this sort of turn-based, really satisfying combat with some spells and all sorts of different units thrown into the mix. The animations are crisp and clean, and the same is true across the world as you attempt to move across with these mages, find towns and settlements, or indeed build your own, because the resources and gear that you gather will help change not just the world around you, but the size of your army and all sorts of other things. Songs of Conquest is brilliant. What is also brilliant is City Skylines, perhaps a predictable entry on the list, granted. At 70% off, this is the best modern city builder strategy simulation game you can find. At least that will be true until later this year, on October the 24th, when City Skylines 2 releases. A lot of hype around that one. But in the meantime, if you haven't picked up City Skylines, it might still be a reasonable idea. You've still got 4 months ahead of you to play the game, and of course, at a fairly attractive 70% off, it's only around $10 to familiarize yourself with City Skylines. Get back into that feel in preparation for City Skylines 2, again, releasing October 24th. Let's get back to the Steam deals though. And of course, Paradox doesn't fail to deliver. Stellaris is another great example on top of Crusader Kings and just before City Skylines. Stellaris is at 70% off, and the rest of the catalogue, like Hearts of Iron 4, Europa Universalis 4, they all present at great specials, although I would note, not as great as they have been in the past. Generally, a little bit lower, perhaps, at 70% off. Something like Stellaris 65 for EU4. We'll have to wait and see. The next item on my list, whirlwinding into the screen, it's Marvel's Midnight Suns. This one, a little bit of a controversial pick, but actually a really fantastic game. Marvel's Midnight Suns presents with a 60% off discount, which on a personal level, I have to admit, makes me a bit mad. I bought the game when it released only at the end of last year, 6 months ago, and it's already 60% off. Why? Well, the game does itself present some additional purchases that you could make. It has a lot of microtransactions, there's a lot of DLC coming out for it and planned to come out for it, with of course all kinds of, by the way, beautifully animated, beautifully rendered, and very satisfying to use Marvel heroes inside of this game. It presents turn-based tactics like XCOM, and then it has a world-building element where you're sort of surviving, walking around and existing in an RPG-like world, dealing with other characters, potentially building relationships with them. It's actually a really solid experience. And the microtransactions, or the sort of cosmetic features even, don't ruin it, although it does have a lot of DLC. That's why I think it's a great recommendation at 60% off, even for just the base game. Try it out. The next item on my list, Age of Empires 4. What is now called Age of Empires 4, the Anniversary Edition, and it's 50% off. Now, a couple of important things to note. It probably doesn't need an introduction, but in case you've been living under a rock for the last 30 years of strategy gaming, Age of Empires 4, not Age of Wonders 4, I'll easily get those confused, is one of the best real-time strategy games out there. Obviously, it's a well-known franchise, so I'll leave it there. The 50% off discount is fairly noteworthy, again, right up there with sort of record levels of discount that we've seen. Another thing to note though, of course, this has a rich franchise behind it. Age of Empires 2, its sort of ultimate definitive edition, could also be a reasonable pickup if you're looking for a slightly more classic feel. But Age of Empires 4 has developed into a really robust experience. It continues to receive a lot of free updates, there's some seasonality to that, and I think it's a solid recommendation if you're not already paying it on Game Pass. But if you are, why are you here? The next item on my list, Civilization 6. Maybe the most predictable of all, but this time it comes with a caveat. The base game is 90% off, which even in my New Zealand dollars has it at $10. That means for you over in the US, it's probably more like $6. I mean, this is a no-brainer. The best 4X turn-based strategy game based on history, likely that's ever been released. Personally, yes, granted, I might be more of a fan of Civ 5 at times, but I think the undisputed popularity and longevity of Civilization 6 make it a really great staple recommendation. I would go a step further this time and say that the Anthology edition at around 42 New Zealand, what's that, 30-ish US dollars, is probably the best deal. You'll get the core DLCs and all of the extra leaders. And the final entry on my list, rounding out my promise of 12 in 12, it's Northguard at 70% off. Northguard comes from Shidor Games, also the team behind Dune Spice Wars, an earlier entry on our list. It's a strategy city builder, and a very competitive one at that. The game itself plays out in real time, so it's a real-time strategy game, important to note, and essentially what you're tasked to do is to build a settlement on a newly discovered continent, Northguard. There are various jobs on offer, farmers, warriors, etc., and you need to manage your resources really carefully to try and stay alive, take over extra territories, and ultimately get those victory conditions. This game receives a lot of DLC, a lot of updates, and a lot of love, and it's an easy recommendation at 70% off. I'll see you with more recommendations next time.